boundaries, administrative boundaries in Kazakhstan. I think it will be an insightful discussion and presentation. Yeah, so floor is yours.
So when we start, well, I try to be as brief as I can in order to save me time. Well, my presentation is about the changes of the administrative boundaries of internal administrative boundaries of Kazakhstan in 2018. As you know, Shymkent became the city of Republican status, and there were even some other changes in the administrative boundary of the regions of Kazakhstan. So let me start. This is the current map, not really current, this is previous map of Kazakhstan. So I couldn't really find a good quality map which was made during recent months. So here Shymkent is shown as part of South Kazakhstan still. So yeah, I'm showing you this map in order to make you remember that changing administrative boundaries is a very common practice in the history of Kazakhstan. If you remember, we started as an independent country in 1991 with 17 regions. Even I remember in my books of geography there were 17 regions. Then suddenly, I remember myself reading the textbooks of geography that the 17 regions became 14 regions due to economic imbalances between the regions of Kazakhstan. I couldn't really understand what was that. So
Voice is
yeah.
up.
I'll try to, yeah.
Also, for the next time, we can maybe connect the microphone with this, because there is a ambience, voice of ambience.
This is not really the map of 1991, but it's very similar to the map that we had in 1991. Originally there were 17 regions. Here we can see some regions that do not exist currently. For example, the Kokshetau region is not anymore here. Kokshetau region became part of it became North Kazakhstan, and part of it became the Akmola region. Also, there were Semipalatinsk region, Semi region. Now it's part of East Kazakhstan region. Yeah, there are also Tolgai region in the territory of Kostanay region. So during the reform of administrative boundaries of 1997, there were several changes made, dividing some of the districts of Kazakhstan to form more bigger regions. It's worth mentioning here that it's very strange practice, and if we observe foreign countries, we rarely found evidence of changing administrative boundaries so often, like in Kazakhstan, for example. We do it too frequently. For 30 years, we had two major changes. One of that was 1997, and the second one happened this year. And yeah, it's a very interesting point to mention here. So, what's so special about South Kazakhstan? What's the main difference of South Kazakhstan in comparison to the rest of Kazakhstan is that the population density in Kazakhstan is very high. Together, the city of Shymkent and current Turkistan region have almost 3 million people. Well, yes, it's about 17% of the total population. 17% of the total population is concentrated in 5% of the territory of Kazakhstan.
So can you show the Turkistan? Turkistan is the tiny place there. I mean, is it brown? Maybe you can use the laser. Ah, here. Okay. You can use the laser pointer as well. So what's the isolated point towards west?
Sorry.
Yeah, can you come to the map again, please?
To the map, those one.
Yeah, the one, there's the isolated map on northwest of Turkestan. Isolated brown spot, patch.
You mean here?
Yeah, the back one. The back.
It's the city of Kızılorda.
Kızılorda, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Kızılorda city.
Yeah, the back point, the button at the back, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the laser.
This
Yes.
is, Kızılorda.
No.
This
Yes.
is Kızılorda.
Kızılorda.
Yeah. Shinkan is right here.
Uh-huh.
And the part which is especially densely populated is here, along the mountain range here. And as a Makhanov region is a special case here. It's this tiny part of Kazakhstan has about more than 300,000 people. 300,000 people. Yeah. It's almost the same as the population of Mangostar region, for example.
Astana is the.
Yes.
Okay.
Astana is the black point here. It also has about 1 million people.
Karaganda is the.
Yeah.
That one.
Karaganda is also a large part here because it's not only Karaganda. It is some other cities like Temirtau, Abay, Shahtinsk, and Saran, and others. Well, so these 4 regions form the population centers of Kazakhstan. Most of the population is concentrated here. Most of the non-oil economic activities are made here, and mainly in 4 points of here. Well, this is the main feature that makes it different from other regions of Kazakhstan. So the term Turkistan caused a very significant emotional uprise among the population, because I know that even among our colleagues there are some people that welcome this idea. The term Turkistan refers to a historical term that was present from medieval time. And during Tsarist Russian Empire, Kazakhstan became a part of Russian Empire, and one of the regions' general governorship. These were the administrative units of that Russian Empire. One of these entities was called Turkestan region or Turkestan general governorship. Well, I'm not sure I'm translating it correctly. So here the boundaries were constantly changing due to political changes, wars, some conquers, etc. And at some historical points, it was very small piece here, and mainly in southern Kazakhstan, current southern Kazakhstan, along the river of Sirdarya. This was the historical center of Turkestan region, and of course around the city of Turkestan, which is a very ancient city. There was also East Turkestan, referring to the territory of current China, where mainly Turkic people lived at that time, but now it's different. Well, I couldn't really find good maps of that here, but these are some of that. This is the comparison of current Kazakhstan and with historical region of Turkestan. So here we can see Turkestan general governorship. It contains current South Kazakhstan and many other Central Asian territories. as I mentioned before, these first reform of administrative boundaries of Kazakhstan was made in 1997, where the number of regions reduced from 17 to 14.
19. From 19 to 14. Okay,
yeah, from 19 to 14, but at some period of time there was 17 was also. I remember, yeah. Yeah.
Было 19, Талды Курган, Жестков, Торгай, Семей, Перекопа, 97.
Yeah. From 19 to 14, and the most recent one became several decisions. One of in South Kazakhstan. These all are being made in South Kazakhstan. So one of the changes was to split the Makhanov region into Jefferson region and Makhanov. Here it is. Jefferson and Makhanov region. This is here. This Makhanov region was split into two. This is Jefferson region, and this is Makhanov region. And yes, and the second change is to split the region of Saragash into two. One being Saragash and the other being Keles region. So the reasoning of when I was reading articles about this decision, there were a few explanations about this. It was very strange. There was no public discussions on this, and the reason was that some experts came up with the idea of splitting these districts into two because of the population size of these districts.
Too big.
Yeah, too big. But too big for what? It wasn't explained really. Too big. If it's too big, you can then you can provide just more facilities, more roads, more schools, and more hospitals. And what was the necessity of splitting drawing new boundaries? I didn't really understand this. From administrative, the point is that in economic terms, this is theoretically is not efficient because you're creating two separate administrations, and creating two separate administrations is always more costly than maintaining one bigger administration. So here we can definitely observe a loss in efficiencies.
But on the other hand, there's a new region, there's a new region called Turkistan. On the other hand, so maybe it can be offset or compensated by this.
Yes, but
I mean, they became more important administrative units in a newly created smaller region. So they were separated into two, but they were somewhat in a more, they became somewhat more senior or more important units in a.
No, I don't think so.
No.
It's more likely that they became even less important because there are two of them instead of one.
Okay.
The other important change is, of course, the change of the status of Shymkent city. The reasoning was the same. The population size exceeded 1 million. This was enough to make this decision, making it the city, making it a city of regional Republican importance, Republican status, just like Almaty or Astana. One good news about this for me that for researchers is that new statistics is now available. Previously it wasn't available. Statistics about Shymkent city in particular. It was in the region, but now it became separate, and we can always get data about Shymkent city, starting from 2018. But in overall terms, it wasn't very clear on what if 1 million is a so important point. Should we expect that in Kazakhstan there will be another administrative reforms, including some other cities into the list? For example, Karaganda, Aktobe. It's very. It would be a very strange practice in comparison to the rest of the world. So here I think.
So what is the difference between a city having a republican status like Astana? Astana is the capital, but Shymkent, let's say, and Aktobe. What is the difference? The budget? The budget is much more.
The budget is larger. It's considered to be as a separate territorial unit, along with other regions and other cities of Republican importance. You will get more financing from the central Republican budget.
Then
So
it can be a good idea.
It's a positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It connotes some kind of positive outcomes, such as, I don't know, new urban infrastructure, such as transportation systems, maybe underground systems. Or
from this point of view, it's definitely a good idea. But
Almaty, sorry, is donor city for the Republican budget.
yes,
right?
yes. I was going to explain this. Yes, the matter is that South Kazakhstan is very dependent on budget transfer from the central budget, from the Republican budget. In overall terms, the Shymkent and Turkistan region, southern Kazakhstan, receives about 80% of its budget from the Republican budget.
is there a map such as receivers and donors? Net?
Yes, unfortunately I didn't find this.
Only the Almaty is the donor.
No.
Atrao, Kraganda, a couple of times was a donor. It's changed.
Industrial.
It changes year to year. Sometimes some year it's donor, some year it's a recipient. It's changing.
Almaty is consistently. Okay.
Yeah, Almaty is a donor.
Yeah, Atrao it's consistent.
Always has been a donor, as well as Western oil producing regions. The rest of the regions differently. They mainly receive money from the Republican budget. And southern Kazakhstan is the biggest receiver of money transfers from the central budget. Now Shymkent city and its worth mentioned that the boundary of the city also changed. This tiny part was previously part of this district. Now it's a city. As a native of that region, I did not welcome this. But I know I saw what was going on during this. I spent some of my time here in Shymkent and see that. The newly added districts are very underdeveloped in terms of infrastructure. There are many areas without potable water. without gas.
There are regions.
Yeah, there are some parts of the city of Shymkent now. It's, these areas became part of the city.
So maybe the reason is that just
yeah.
balancing this out.
So the point here is that in Kazakhstan, we are in a situation that the well-being of the households, the infrastructural development, often is very dependent on the status of the territory. Now, in the city of Turkistan, we can also observe that previously it was not a very nice place to live. But after becoming this regional center, things are changing.
Very rapidly.
Yeah, yeah. The small difference in one decision of someone makes the whole difference here. So it's in this terms, the practice of Kazakhstan is actually negative, because if we focus on more developed countries, the financing from the central budget or regional budget is dependent on per capita basis, not on status of a city or a region.
Okay.
So, well, in overall terms, South Kazakhstan is very underdeveloped in economic terms. Or you can see here that GRP is the gross regional product, the analogous to GDP. Here we can see that Shymkent city has about only 4.5% of the GRP. Recall that Shymkent has almost the same population as Astana, but Astana produces almost 10%, twice as more. Almaty is even more. Almaty is about only 1.7 million people, and Shymkent is 1 million, but the difference is very big between the two countries, or between the two cities. If we focus on Turkistan region, we can see that it has the smallest contribution to the GDP, and it has the smallest GDP, the smallest region in terms of GRP. It's really shows the underdevelopedness of that region. But in terms of population, it has a really big population. We get 4.5%, and Turkistan about more than 10% of the total population. Well, why is that southern regions of Kazakhstan are underdeveloped in comparison to the rest of the countries? So there are several reasons for that. In theoretical terms, if we refer to classical theories of regional economics, southern Kazakhstan is a very unusual case, because if we focus on other countries, it's often the case when density of the population contributes to the welfare of the households living there. But here we can see an inverse of that. The most densely populated areas have very small welfare, income or GDP per capita. There are, in geographical terms, there are very considerable natural advantages that make Kazakhstan, the southern part of Kazakhstan, more advantageous, but they're not exploited properly. So and we have such a situation when southern Kazakhstan is the most underdeveloped part of Kazakhstan.
Can you give some examples about this unexploited potential you said?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Which sectors maybe?
Yeah. If we take, for example, agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the most suitable area for agriculture is southern Kazakhstan.
Mm-hmm.
We have enough water resources, enough land resources, but agriculture is very in agriculture in Kazakhstan. In agriculture, we have very low labor productivity because of lack of capital. I'm referring to new technologies, transport units, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very densely populated. It means that it has a very high concentration of population, which contributes to a so-called economies of scale. When you can increase productivity with not proportional increase in labor or capital resources, and it is still it's one of the regions that has it's the section of the Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Eastern Europe, Western China transport corridor. But it's still worth mentioning here that South Kazakhstan was the last region to complete this project.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really understand why this is the case. In terms of industry, it has a very small share in comparison to the rest of the region. About 4.9% of its GRP is industry, whereas for the country, it's in total it makes only almost 17%.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned before, low productivity in most of the sectors, especially in agriculture, and high poverty ratios, and shadow economy. That's another important point in southern Kazakhstan. Yes, the advocates that state that southern Kazakhstan is not so poor as they claim. They refer to the fact that shadow economy is the highest in southern Kazakhstan. Well, I would agree with the statement. Again, being a native of that region, I know the local culture, and there are no precise studies about what's the size of shadow economy in there. But there are studies about Kazakhstan. Most of the studies say that it's around 30% of the GDP of Kazakhstan, of total of the whole country is shadow economy. And in South Kazakhstan, this can be 40 or even 50%. The reasons for shadow economy are the particularities of local culture, the so-called negative social capital, when people are used to dealing with other people they trust, and if somebody doesn't know you, even if you have good credentials, if that person doesn't know you, he wouldn't make deal with you. You would rather make deals with his neighbors or relatives or etc. Often public positions are distributed to relatives, and this is called tribalism. Yet, immigration of the population, yes, it's another major problem. the official figures of unemployment are very unrealistic, I would say. According to official statistics, it's about 5%, but I would say it's much more than that, especially in South Kazakhstan.
5%?
5%.
The official number is 5%?
Yeah.
Very low.
It's even lower than that now. It's about 4.9 or 4.8. But I wouldn't believe that. I wouldn't believe it.
Very impressive figure.
In Kazakhstan. Yes, I wouldn't believe this, the statistics, but because it's, I feel that it's much higher than that, and in southern Kazakhstan, it's even higher than that.
So the general number for Kazakhstan, the general number for Kazakhstan is 5%.
Yeah.
Official rate.
Official. For the whole country.
Yeah, for the whole country.
I think lower.
Or even lower.
Even lower than that.
Lower.
Wow.
Yes. This causes large outflows of population, migration to mostly to Astana, Almaty, and western oil-producing regions, and most of the migration from Turkistan region comes to the city of Shymkent. Yeah, it's interesting to know that South Kazakhstan has been for a long time the largest giver of population to other regions. Yeah, there's a largest net loss of population due to emigration. I think it's a reliable indicator of economic situation there. Yeah, it's about yearly more than 40,000 people. Not yearly, but between January and November of this year, the latest data. High concentration, as I mentioned earlier, higher concentration doesn't contribute to higher productivity or high income per capita, which is an unusual case. Well, if we refer to the city of Shymkent, if we take the latest statistics, we can also find that there are some differences that make Shymkent very different from other two Republican cities of Astana and Almaty, which are practically the same in many terms, but Shymkent is a different case. Well, the first is if we focus on the share of industry, surprisingly for many of you, that Astana and Almaty has very low shares of industry. It's true that bigger cities in Kazakhstan do not serve as a hub for industries. They serve as a hub for services. Yeah. About 2/3 of all services in Kazakhstan are produced in cities of Astana and Almaty. Yeah. But Shymkent is a different case. It has about 27% of its GRP as industry.
So there's a big potential for improvement in services in Shymkent.
Yeah.
So tourism, other sectors can be.
Well, most of the industry in Shymkent is manufacturing, which is a priority sector nowadays. If we focus on the second part of us, sector, which is information and communication, which is the service sector, we also find an inverse between Almaty, Astana, and Shymkent. Shymkent has a very small proportion of communication and information, whereas Astana and Almaty are completely different industry. Finance and insurance, we can also observe that Shymkent has only 50%, about 50% of the finance and insurance compared to that of Astana. Science and research, Shymkent again has very small proportion of GRP in terms of science and research.
Can we compare Shymkent with Karaganda or some other cities in terms of some of the figures?
Unfortunately not,
No?
because
Oh,
we have to wait until they become Republican cities.
there are no statistics
There are no available statistics, but
for
I
the city proper.
But I
Only for
believe
Uh-huh.
we can ask the Committee of Statistics and they would provide us.
Mhm.
I think, but I don't know.
Yeah, according to your intuition, I mean, Chimkent, Karaganda is an industrial city, so it can be figures similar to Chimkent, and
Yeah.
also, I don't know, other sectors, maybe more similar than to Almaty and
Yes.
Astana, to Karaganda, for example.
Yeah, in many terms, Chimkent is not like big city. It's more like smaller cities. Smaller cities like Turkistan, Taldykurgan, Semipalatinsk, Pavlodar. These regions have large industries. Usually, these kind of cities have a central, a large plant, which is typically a metallurgy or something else, coal industry, and everything is concentrated around that sector, around that plant. And Chimkent is, despite its size, it's very similar to smaller cities. The modern cities in Kazakhstan are called modern cities. Yeah. Yeah. Other services also, Chimkent has very small service sector. And the reasons of these are my personal feelings and my personal view, and you may not agree with this, but I understand recent changes in the administrative reform of Kazakhstan as an attempt to resolve economic problems with traditional methods that we inherited very much with that we inherited from the Soviet Union. Bureaucracy. I added two sections of bureaucracy. The first one, the old-fashioned governments, which I don't know. I can't quote it precisely, but bureaucracy always creates more bureaucracy to serve the needs of the existing bureaucracy. So here I would say that this is a typical example of that. When it's administrative of South Kazakhstan, the Akimat had created more bureaucracy to serve the needs of the existing bureaucracy. And this is also a culture, administrative and political culture in most of these post-Soviet countries, when if there is a challenge or serious problem, we tend to create some committees or some national companies or some ministries, etc. For example, if there are forest fires frequently happening, we might create a ministry of forest fires. Yeah. And if there are too much poverty, we can create a ministry of poverty, and etc. Of course, this is not an efficient way of resolving this problem. And the second bureaucracy section here refers to the interests of the local elites, which try to create more public positions for themselves or for their relatives or for their friends and neighbors, etc. To make their deals, personal deals. Taking into account the negative social capital of Southern Kazakhstan and local culture, I am convinced that this might well be the case, and this is all was veiled or covered with the term Turkistan, which appeals to very sensitive feelings among Kazakhs. The term Turk refers to Turk, reminds some historical feelings, historical affections. In certain term, it's place on the national pride of the Kazakh people. So in media and mass media, this was demonstrated as a resurgence or recovery of the national pride or something like this. It sounds ridiculous, but to most of the people it really works.
And even beyond Kazakhstani borders. It can be.
Kazakhstan, those who don't understand the reality of Kazakhstan, they also accepted this very positive, they welcome this idea of creating a Turkistan region. But in fact, if we come to economic, to real figures, to economic terms, this is not a very positive event, I would say. Well, this is the end of my presentation. So.
Okay.